Today's daf is daf Memtes, and Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow we start Gidin. Omrim Lefanov. The children, even though they were taken away from this world because of the sins of their fathers, they come in front of the Ribono Shel Olam and they say, "Me'achar shata asid lipara mehem." Eventually, in the world to come, you'll be punishing our parents, our fathers. Is lama hikesa shineim. So why do you have them suffer in this world by losing their children? Rahman al-Islam, let them be punished in the world to come. Rabbi Lo bar Yevrachia, another statement. Ilmolei tfilasa shel Chavakuk. I'm sorry. Ilmolei tfilasa shel David. You call Yisrael Mochrei Revav. Mochrei Revav is a phrase that indicates the abject poverty of somebody who collects, the cheapest thing around to sell it. Fat, grease, things that stain clothing, adhere to clothing. And only the poorest person would have to engage in the sale of such goods. And were it not be for David's petition, Israel would be totally, totally impoverished. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, in the 9th chapter of Tehillim, Shisa Hashem Mor Lahem, give them Hashem mastery. So this is a Mizmor LeDavid, and in an earlier Pasuk, in that Mizmor, the Pasuk we're looking at is Pasuk Chaf Aleph, but in Pasuk Yutes, David HaMelech speaks about a poor person who's afflicted. And these are allusions to Klal Yisrael, who are oppressed and exploited by the nations, and David HaMelech petitions Hashem to grant Israel mastery, to enrich Israel, so that the nations will respect and honor them. And therefore, in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, which is the Pasuk that we're studying, he says, let the nations know that they are mere men. In other words, the oppressors should realize that they're not anything more than mere men. They're basar v'dam. They're limited and they're finite. They're not omnipotent. Whatever wealth and power they have amassed, it's only because God gave them that. V'yamar Rabbi Lo bar Yevrachia ilmolei tfilos shel Chavakuk hayushnei talmidei chacham miskasim b'talas achas v'yoskim b'Torah. The poverty would have been such, if not for Chavakuk's tefillah, that the Talmidei Chacham would not have each enough money to buy a pair of clothes or a blanket to cover themselves. They'd have to share them. Shenemar, because the Pasuk says in Chavakuk, Hashem shamati shemacha, I have heard your power. Shemacha means your power. Yoresi Hashem polecha, and I am awed by your power. Bekerev shanim chayeru, and arouse once more your actions of bygone times in these years. And this whole chapter in the 3rd parak of Chavakuk is introduced by the prayer of Chavakuk. And the Gemara now, in the name of Rabbi Loi, interprets this pasuk. Al tikra bekerev shanim el bekeruv shnayim. Just change the vocal, the vowels here, and it's the same exact word. So we're not going to read it bekerev shanim in these years, but rather bekeruv shnayim, when two come near. And this is an allusion to the two Talmidei Chacham that have to share one talis. So therefore, what this pasuk is saying is that Hashem, your action here is an allusion to the study of Torah, because the Torah teaches us how to act. Now, currently, it can only be undertaken when two come near, two pairs of scholars huddling under one single covering, and therefore Habakkuk says, Chayehu. What does Chayehu mean? Revive it. Meaning give the scholars whatever they need to allow them to study effectively. V'yomer Rabbi Lo bar Yivrechva, Shnei Talmidei Chacham ha'mahalchim b'derech ve'ein b'neihem divrei Torah ru'uyim lisarif be'esh. If they don't discuss Torah, they should be burnt. Shenemar, and here Rabbi Loi is going to quote a pasuk that describes the last moments of a Rebbe, Elio, and his Talmud, Elisha, in this world. And the pasuk in Malachim Beis, Perek Beis, says, Vayhi hema holchim haloch v'daber. We're going to see that daber means they were talking in Torah. V'hine rechav eish. And there's a chariot of fire, horses of fire. And these horses of fire separated between the two of them. This chariot of fire was meant to carry Elisha on his ascent to heaven. So now the Gemara is medayik in the pasuk, right? The Nevi'im here are walking, as it says, haloch, and speaking vidaber. Taimadi kadibur. The reason why the chariot of fire is only separating between the two, but it's not burning them, is because the kadibur, because there were words of Torah between them. Lekadibur, had there not been words of Torah, then Ru'uyim Lisaref, they would have been engulfed and burnt by the fire of these chariots. Another statement of the same Omar Rabbi Lo bar Yivarechya. Shnei Talmidei Chacham adorim bir achas v'yein nochim zeh lo zeh b'halacha. So these scholars are not in good terms, and they each have a different approach to halacha, and they refuse to even get together to learn together to try to work out their disagreements and find matters of halacha on which they agree. And if they would engage in calm and amicable discussion, each one would gain an insight from the other. And as a result, echad meis v'echad gola. Now, what that means, I have here a discrepancy between the Masechet and the Art Scroll translation. In the Masechet, when it says echad meis, he translates it al yidei chavero. In other words, one of these two scholars, Bishogeg, unintentionally killed his friend, the echad gola, and therefore, as a result of the fact that his friend was killed, he, meaning the colleague who killed him, has to go into golus. However, the Art Scroll has a different translation. He says that one happened to die and the other one happened to go into golus, like there were two separate cases. In any event, Shenemar, what pasuk does Rabbi Loi base his reasoning on? He says that in the parsha of Ari Miklat, it says Bivli das, Lanus Shama Rotzeach Asher Yitzach Es Chavero Bivli das. And the word das here doesn't mean the simple pshat of unintentionally, but rather it should be interpreted homiletically as ein das al Torah shenemar. In a pasuk in Hosea it says, Nidmu ami mibli das vatishkach Toras Elokecha. My people are mute for the lack of knowledge. And what is the lack of knowledge? Despised the knowledge, and you have forgotten the Torah of your God. So now, Yirtzach Esre'eu Bivli Das. Because of a chisaron of Torah, they didn't have that das to learn one from the other, to teach one to the other. Therefore, it ended up in this situation where one died and the other had to go into golus. If a person is studying Torah, I would translate it as in poverty, and that's how the Masechet has it, ha'oni. In the English translation, he calls it adversity, meaning a more general concept. Tfilas nishmas. God will hearken to his prayer. Shenever pasuk in Yeshaya, Ki am b'tzion yeshev b'Yerushalayim b'cholo sivkech chanon yechencha l'kol zakcha kish'amaso ona. So this pasuk in Yeshaya, for people shall dwell in Zion, in Yerushalayim, you shall not weep. You shall grant your wants at the sound of your outcry. Upon hearing, he will answer you. So the outcry here, which is called in Yeshaya a zakah, is a reference to tefillah, to petition. Now the key word here in this pasuk for our drash is Yeshev, ki am b'tzion Yeshev. And the word Yeshev is an allusion to a yeshiva. A yeshiva means a study of Torah. And whose tefillah is accepted here in this pasuk, where it says, Zakecha b'sham aso, Ksiv basrei, it says in the next pasuk, this is pasuk Yutes in Perek Lamed, and now we're moving on to pasuk Chaf in that same perek, and it says, "V'nasan lochem Hashem lechem tsar u'mayim lochatz." So the pasuk describing meager bread and scant water speaks of those who are impoverished, and they subsist on meager bread and scant water. Nevertheless, they will persevere in the study of Torah, and as a result, their prayers are accepted. Rabbi Avo Omer Masbin Oso Miziv Ashchina, a person who studies Torah, even Ba'oni, then he will be sated with the splendor of the divine presence. In other words, he'll be privy to that level of revelation that's likened to a direct perception of the divine countenance. And from whence do we derive this? Shenemar, also there in Yeshaya, it says, V'hayu einecha ro'os es morecha. And here the word morecha, which literally translates as your teacher, but here we put a capital T, Tzlomar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Chia Bar Chanina Amar, not only that, but Af ein hapargo ninol befonov, even that curtain, which is the mechitza, the barrier that separates us from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the upper hosts, it will not be locked. Eina nin elis. Milashkiach olav l'tova. It means Hashem will shine his direct providence upon this Torah scholar who is destitute. Shenemar v'lo yikanev od morecha. Again, in that same pasuk, your teacher will no longer cloak himself, meaning he will not remove himself or hide behind any sort of screen or barrier. Rav Shingam Lil Omer Shum Rav Yeshua Miyom Shechar Beis Hamikdash Ein Yom She'ein Bo Klola. There's no day without its curse. Amar Rava, not only is there a klala on each day, Ella, but rather it's even worse than that. That B'chol Yom V'Yom Meruba Kilasim Mishal Chavero. The curse is even greater today than the previous day. Shenemar, I see this in a pasuk at the end of the Torah. It says, "Ba'boker tomar mi'itein erev, u'ba'erev tomar mi'itein boker." In the morning you will say, "Would it were evening," and the evening say, "Would it were morning." Okay, so Rava now darshans the pasuk. Hi boker, that word morning is, when it says mi'itein boker, what is it referring to? Ilema boker dilam bachar. If a person at the evening is waiting for the following morning, Mi yoda mai havi. Why is he misave? Why is he desiring tomorrow, boker? He doesn't know it's going to be tomorrow. Ella, on the contrary, what the word boker means here is the cholif, the day that passed. So he's waiting for tomorrow because yesterday was so much worse than the day before and the day before. And at the end, because of this tochacha, the klola of today is going to be worse than the klola of yesterday. So therefore, having experienced the curse of yesterday, he would love for today to be better than yesterday, or at least to be as good as yesterday, but instead, the curse of today is going to be worse than yesterday. The Ella Alma Amai Komakayim. So the Gemara says that in this situation, where perhaps tomorrow will be worse than today, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Each day's curse is worse than the day before. So on what basis does the world endure? In other words, with this curse that's worsening constantly, the world is going to deteriorate. And how can we ensure that the world will continue to exist? And there are two things that could ensure that the world could continue to exist. One is called Kedusha de Sidra, and the other is Ahesh Me Rabba Dagadata. So the last one we understand, that's Yehesh Me Rabba. After you finish learning Agadata, you recite a Kaddish D'Rabbanan, in which you recite Yehesh Me Rabba, which is Kiddush Hashem. And then we have Kedusha de Sidra, which is Uvolet Sion. We have another Kedusha de Uvolet Sion. And he points out here that Kach b'hayim min hagam b'chol Shabbos adarshan dorish b'divrei Agada kol ha'am nikbotzim l'shmoa v'liach mikani yu omrim kaddish. So that's called Kedusha de Sidra on a weekly basis, when the darshan would darshan b'divrei Agada on Shabbos in front of the entire congregation, and then they would recite Kaddish. So that is an integration of Limud Torah and Kedushas Hashem through the recitation of Kedusha. V'chein, and also Kedusha de Sidra shetiknua kedei she'ei kol Yisrael oskim b'chol yom v'yom v'mat Torah and yesh Kedusha Hashem im Limud Torah. So again, with Uvolet Sion, where we integrate Torah study and then a Kedusha, so we have both Limud Torah and Kedusha Hashem. Shenemar, and we derive this from a pasuk in Eov. Eretz, a fossa kemo ofel. The world is dark as the gloom of death's shadows. Salmoves velos dorin. For lack of order. So the word starim is very important here. It's sort of like a code word. Hayesh starim tofia me ofel. So the darkness and the gloom of the world is attributed to the fact that there are no starim. Starim means the two starim that we spoke about before, which are Sidra de Kedusha and Yehesh Me Rabbah. And if there would be, the implication of the pasuk is if there would be these starim, and we're going to have an integration of the parashas of the Torah, Limud Torah, together with Kedusha, then Tofia Meofel, Ha'aretz Ta'ir V'Tizrach. There'll be light in the world. V'lo tal libracha v'nital tam peros. The Mishnah says that as a result of the destruction of the Mikdash, the dew did not descend in blessing, and the flavor of fruit was removed. Rabbi Yossi, Okay, so we have Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Elazar. Rabbi Shimon Elazar Omer, Tahara, Bitla, Tam, V'reach. which means that the cessation of Tara caused the removal of flavor and fragrance, and this we discussed yesterday. And furthermore, Maser Bitol Shuman Adogan. And the cessation of Maser caused the removal of the cream of the grain. Rav Huna Ashkach Tomarta D'Chinunisa. Rav Huna found a creamy date. He says, Min Tamar Shamen Sheyesh Bo Reach Tov Shkola and Karcha Besudre. So he took it and he folded, he wrapped it up in a beged. Asa Rabba Bure. So we're now talking about the son of Rav Huna. In a minute, we'll get to the grandson of Rav Huna. Amar Le. So Rabba, the father, says to Rav Huna, Rabba, the son, turns to his father and he says, Morichna Recha Dechinulisa. I smell the smell of this very creamy date. Amar Le. So Rav Huna says to his son, Bini, Tahar Yesh B'cha. If you were able to smell this fragrant odor and it wasn't batel bimcha, then it must mean that you were zocher, that you merited this because of your tahara. Yava, so Rav Huna, after applauding his son Rabbah, he gives him the date, the creamy date nearly. In the meantime, Asa Abba pray the Rabbah. So now we're talking about Abba, who is the grandson of Rav Huna, the son of Rabbah, Shakla, Rabbah, the father, who's the son of Rav Huna, takes this date, Yavi Nila, and he gives it to his son Abba, the grandson of Rav Huna. Rav Huna turns to Rabbi and says, B'ni, simachta es libi. When I saw that you were not batel from Tara, meaning that Tara didn't cease, but yet he kesa es shinai, which means, again, literal translation is that you have dulled my teeth, but what it means in a metaphoric sense is that you pained me. Why? Because on the one hand, I was glad to discover your purity, but now you pain me by demonstrating that your love for your son exceeds your love for me. You took the date from me and gave it to him. And this is expressed in a popular idiomatic maxim. And the compassion or love of a father for his son, a father's love is for his son, but the son's love is for his own son. So this Gemara is not such good news for the Zaydas. Rav Acha bar Yaakov itafel bei Rav Yaakov bar Barte. Rav Acha raised his grandson, right? His daughter's son. Ki Gadal, and just 1 second. Wait a minute. Why is Rav Yaakov? Rav Acha? Oh, yeah. So the grandson's name is Rav Yaakov, and the grandfather's name is Rav Acha. And Ki Gadol, when this Rav Yaakov grew up, and he's the grandson of Rav Acha, Amalei, Rav Acha says to his grandson, Ashkied Maya, bring me a cup of water. Amalo, and his grandson, Rav Yaakov, says to his grandfather, Rav Acha, La Briana, I'm not your son. I'm the son of your daughter. And therefore, I don't have that same obligation of Kibbud Av Va'em, because you're my grandfather, not my father. Inchi, Rabbi, Bar Bartoch Ano. So there's a popular saying that says, raise me, Rabbi, raise me, but I may eventually tell you I'm not your own son, I'm the son of your daughter. So I don't have to honor you as a son, it has to honor his father. And that leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Mem Tes. There's a lot of history here in this Mishnah, but I don't know if we'll have the ability to learn all the history. Bipulmus Shalaspayinus. Okay, this is the time of the Churban Abayis Sheni, and we're talking about Vespasian. Okay, he had a campaign against Yerushalayim at the time of the Churban. So the word pulmus here is an army. Now, Vespasian was the Roman general who laid siege to Yerushalayim, and during the siege, he received news that the Emperor Nero had died and that the Senate in Rome had proclaimed him as emperor. Vespasian left the battlefield and left his son Titus in command of the legion surrounding Yerushalayim. After a siege of 3.5 months, Titus succeeded in breaching the city and destroying the temple. And this is all in the famous Haggadah in Gittin. The Mishnah here refers to the first stage of the siege, where Vespasian was still conducting the siege. And at that time, Gazru al Atros Chasonim Vial Ha'irus. Okay, the Gemara is going to go into detail, but they made a ban on certain kinds of ataros which grooms used to wear. A bridegroom would customarily wear some sort of a coronet on his head made of a variety of materials. And it was very festive. And now, after the Churban, the Rabbanan made Gzeira not to wear Ataros Chasanim. Irus, we don't know what it is. He translates Irus as a musical instrument. Okay, so Gemara is going to tell us what that's all about. And now we get to the second stage after Vespasian was called back to Rome and Titus takes over. But Pulmos Sel Titus, the campaign of Titus, which ultimately led to the Churban. Okay, and this is many, many years later, Gazur al Atros Kalos. So now we're talking about the wreaths of the Kalos. Okay. He says, okay, there's a lot of history here, which I'm not going to go into, but the Gemara is going to go into Ataros Kalos. And they outlawed teaching a son Greek. And this refers to a different kind of language, not the common Greek language, the spoken language, but to an esoteric system of codes that was intelligible only to those who were initiated into the Greek aristocracy. Okay, now we're getting to the third and final campaign, which concluded with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and it was led by Titus. So when we said before there was a Titus campaign, an earlier event, distinct from this final stage, then perhaps it's referring to the fact that there was a siege and collapse of Beitar when Hadrian had suppressed the Jewish revolt led by Bar Kokhba. And that was 65 years after the destruction. So according to that interpretation, this is a whole different chronological order. And the final war here is the war of Bar Kokhba. All right, now the custom was that when the bride was led from her father's home to a new husband's house, she would be enclosed within a decorative canopy of gold embroidered tapestries and hangings. And Gazush lo teitze akala bapiryon. And they instituted a decree that forbid a bride from going forth in this canopy, bitocha ir, within the city. Means be base avil base baila. And when it says here within the city, the implication would be that maybe outside the city it would be mutter. But in any event, Rabbi Sotah itiru sheteitze akala b'peryon b'tocha ir. However, for tznius reasons, the later Rabbanim permitted a bride to go forth in this canopy within the city. And this would be a safeguard because it would sort of, the people would know that, they can't look at the bride and so forth and so on. So the rabbis permitted the bride's canopy. And we're going to see later on that that's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Mishameis Rabbi Meir Botlu Moshle Misholim. With the death of Rabbi Meir, there ceased to be composers of parables. Okay, so these were exquisite metaphors to clarify subtle points. Rabbi Meir was uniquely skilled author of parables, including many fables with foxes, etc. With the death of Ben Azai, there ceased to be diligent scholars. After Ben Zoma died, there ceased to be experts in darshaning. Darshaning here means exegesis. And Ben Zoma was a Baki Lidrosh Tamia Mikros, Kimavur Bibrachos Daf Yud Beis. Like, for example, in the question of Yitzias Mitzrayim Baleilos, it was only the drasha of Ben Zoma that established that we have a mitzvah as Chiyus Yisrael. That's just one example. Mishabeis Rabbi Akiva, Batel Kvod Torah. The glory of Torah ceased. What does this mean? So he says here that with the death of Rabbi Akiva, Shayanosen el libo lidrosh kol os vios v'kol kots shel kol achas b'Torah zeu kvoda she'im bo davar levatla. Which I believe is, if I'm not mistaken, is based on a Gemara Menach. So this is covered at Torah because no one could be mavatel the Torah of Rabbi Akiva when he interpreted every letter and every quotes. Mishmeis Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, Batlu Anshe Maisa. Now, who are the Anshe Maisa, the people of deeds? These are people who are Botchim B'chashivusam Eis HaKadosh Baruch Hu Osem Maisa Muflam. So they're capable of doing outstanding things because they are secure in their stature in front of the Ribono Shel Olam. Mishmeis Rabbi Yossi Ktonata, and he says that Ktonta means, 1 second. He says the lesser. So Lama Nikra Shmo Ktonta Shaya Ktonta Shel Chasidim. Now that doesn't sound like a great compliment. He says Rabbi Yossi was exceptionally pious, and in fact celebrated for his piety, yet he was the last and least exemplar of an era of piety. Pious men whose numbers had been declining steadily vanished utterly with the death of Rav Yossi. Mishameis Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, Batel Ziv HaChachma. With the death of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, the splendor of wisdom ceased. Mishameis Rabbi Gamliel HaZaken Batel Kavod HaTorah, meaning the people started sitting when they learned instead of standing. V'chein Mesa Tahara, and Tahara came to an end. Uprecious, and abstinence. Mishameis Rabbi Shmuel ben Pavi, Batla Ziv HaKohuna, the splendor of Kohuna ceased. He was a Chacham and an Ashir. Vayukonim Rabim Ochlam al Shulchanim. Mishameis Rebbe, Batla Nova V'yiras Chet. Humility ceased as well as the dread of sin. And again, I apologize because there's hours and hours of work here that we don't have the time for, just on the last section that we learned in this last mission. With the destruction of the Mikdash, Chaverim, which is a reference to Talmidei Chachamim, Ubnei Chorin, are miuchasim, which are literally high-born men, v'chafu rosham, and they were ashamed so that they had to cover their heads. And this is because the Amei Haaretz freely ridicule chaverim, and they taunt the high-born with innuendos concerning their ancestry. And Gavra Yodam Shal Azei Panim Vinidaldalu Anshe Maisa, and there was an impoverishment of the number of men of merit. The Gavru Bali Zroa Bali Lashon, strong-armed men and slanderers became very powerful, and they triumphed. The Ein Doresh Ein Mevakish. There's no one who is seeking and searching for rachamim for them. The Ein Shoel Alehem. No one inquires about them. He says here that no one seeks to benefit Israel. No one adequately beseeches for God's mercy upon them. No person is around to offer some sort of remedy. We can only rely on our Father in heaven. Rabbi Eliezer Agadol Omer, Yom Shechar Beis Hamikdash Sharu Chachimaya Lemehevi Kisafraya. Scholars began to look like school teachers. The Safraya and school teachers began to be, or to look like Kechazanaya, like synagogue attendants, Meshamshei Atzibur, V'chazanaya Ke'amodi Ara, and synagogue attendants like unlearned commoners, which is called Amei Haaretz. The Amodi Ara and the common people